Let's talk about another strategy idea that you talk about, I guess it was AOC going after, is the non-voters. You talk about Jesse Jackson referred to them as rocks and how he thought they were key. Bernie was asked on a cable talk show, if wealth and income inequality is the most important issue to you, why in the 6 out of 7 states where it's the greatest did you lose? And he said poor people don't vote. And that's true, but he didn't try to go after poor people. So we had at LA for Bernie a low-income outreach program, and we went to Walmart and Target and dollar stores where we tried to tell people that there was this candidate. I mean, I know you guys can't believe this because nobody represents your interest in Washington, but there really is this candidate, and we started talking about positions. Staffers came out here with, okay, we're going to go after the likely Democratic voters, and they actually cut lists where they were leaving households behind if they weren't Democratic voters. And my volunteers were just ignoring the list, and they were knocking on every door. What do you think about the tug between the professional class and the DNC and the establishment and AOC and her victories and some of these other victories that you wrote about? How do you see that playing in 2020, specifically with regards to Joe Biden? And also your comment about voter pundits. I love that. You think that the voters all imagine that they can determine who's electable.
Right, and there is a fundamental tension between the consultant class that is charged with coming up with the messaging and the agenda for candidates, and sometimes the agenda that would be most successful in doing what you're talking about, bringing out more poor people to vote. I quote Mike Lux in that book, who's has kind of straddled the kind of establishment and also insurgent world since the Clinton era in Washington. And so he has interesting insights into the consultant class as a sort of honorary member of it, but also somebody who is an honorary member of the insurgent side. And what he said is that he's been in a ton of meetings where they'll put the polls out in the field, and the question will be about raising taxes on people making more than $200,000, let's say. And the numbers will come back, and it'll be quite clear that everybody's for that. And the consultants will use anecdotal evidence that is related to their neighbor, and, and their neighbor is asking for a friend, complaining for a friend, and they will say, this is not. I don't think this poll is right. I don't think this is the messaging that we should use.
Serious antecedent bias.
And if they're more realistic / cynical about it, they will say, okay, that might be the better policy to get a couple extra points on this side. You're also going to lose your big donors over here. Like they do not like that, and your campaign is very heavily reliant on maxed out people, and so therefore let's step away from this. And so both the consulting class's own socioeconomic status and the way that the campaign is funded create a tension with the exact thing that you're talking about. But yeah, the vote, I don't know exactly when it started, but the Democratic primary voters, more so interestingly than Republican ones, fancy themselves to be pundits, and might be the educational advantage that Democratic primary voters have, where they will say, I'm not a huge fan of Joe Biden, but my intuition is that there are other people out there who are huge fans, who would vote for Joe Biden, that he's the one that can beat. Or
don't you think that's just Hillary 2.0 again?
Yes.
Well, it's Hillary 2.0.
It's
it's John Kerry 2.0.
It's the same.
Dukakis 2.0. It's Mondale 2.0. These are all people who.
How many times they have
were
to
not
lose?
right. They were not people who were who the electorate itself was excited about, but the electorate convinced itself that other people would be excited about them.
Yeah.
But of course, there are not Republican voters who like Joe Biden. They like Donald Trump.
Yes.
So they overthink it, and
so you think it could be a self-fulfilling prophecy this year?
Right. So and to me, there isn't enough time to change that psyche. The only way that Democrat Democratic primary voters to me are going to be persuaded. Well, two, whether they could be out-organized and out-maneuvered. But the pundit class of voters who believe that Joe Biden is more electable will just have to be convinced that he's actually not more electable.
Yeah, well, let's
right?
talk.
Not that he's wrong on issues,
which he
is.
is.
And they will tell you that. Like they will say, I don't. And there are already polls that show this. That
how many more girls?
That people don't. People say they.
Not even that. It's
He's
the
done.
crime bill. It's the bankruptcy bill. It's
Hyde Amendment.
the Hyde Amendment. And I found something in your book that I didn't know, that he voted to extend the Bush tax cuts.
Yes.
Oh,
You said, okay, something surprising. You said that half the Democratic elites were for Jackson in their hearts. I want to know why you made that assessment. And also you said that the Democratic political class argued that Jackson was unelectable, just like today they're saying Bernie is unelectable because he's a socialist. So I'm just wondering if that...
So
yeah.
hearts is, it's an interesting concept when it comes to like the Democratic elites or Democratic establishment, because a lot of and it becomes almost confused and pointless to even talk about after they've been in that ecosystem for a certain amount of time. But from my experience with them is that a huge number of them got into politics for the right reasons, and a part of them, very much cared and cares about the direction of the country in their teens and early 20s. But they're so far, like they've been in it for so long that it almost becomes pointless to ask, like, well, what do they really believe? Like people will say, like, what's Pelosi, what does she really think about impeachment or Medicare for all or whatever?
Yeah.
And there may be a private position that she will talk about with her closest friends that is different than her public one, but it's beyond the point.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
When you've been acting a certain way for 30, 40 years, that's you.
Yeah.
Like you are how you are acting and the role that you're carrying out. So so that's not to. So I don't want to put too much stock in that.
Well,
But that's what I'm referencing there.
so then we go back to the electability thing. So, and I want to talk to you about the political media that maybe I'm freaking out too much about, because probably no average voters read Politico and the Huffington Post and the Intercept. But what really bothers me is that they're doing to Bernie again what they did to him in 2016.
Yep.
I mean, you have this Sidney Ember from the New York Times talking to him, trying to ask him these gotcha questions about his supporting Daniel Ortega and the Sandinistas. And him saying to her, I don't think you know what you're talking about,
Exactly.
because that was actually the good side to support. What
I agree.
are you going to support? The Contras?
Yeah, I thought he got a lot of criticism for being rude, but
Yes.
I thought in
He's
one
right.
way he was being polite in the sense that he was giving her the benefit of the doubt that she didn't know
Yeah.
that the people that she was talking about were bayoneting toddlers.
Yeah.
Yeah. With Elliot Abrams. Like,
That right
Painted.
that the only way you could make an assumption like you're making would be that if you didn't really know the actual background,
Yep.
because otherwise you're a monster. And
And I will
so
venture to say she doesn't know, because I know Sidney Ember's mom.
Wow.
And I tried to talk to Shane Goldmacher about this. Shane Goldmacher,
Yeah,
by the way, he used to be with Politico, now he's with the New York Times, writing about the 2020 race.
Yeah.
He was so rude and condescending to me. This was at the Bernie fundraiser
I
up in
believe it.
San Francisco. So
Was he
he's
there?
sitting there talking to Sean Sullivan in the press box, where I happened to get into, because I was covering it. And they're talking about baseball, so I figure they're not really working, I can interject. And I say to him, I preface it with, I don't know you, I don't know anything about your background, but I'm really upset about the way the New York Times
Good for
is
you.
covering Bernie Sanders, because I believe that, there's no such thing as objective journalism. I think everybody comes
You're
with
right.
either an implicit or an
Yes.
explicit
Yes.
bias.
100%.
I make mine explicit. I make no bones about saying I'm an advocacy journalist, But here you have this and I said, I think that journalists today, and you can speak to this because you know them all, come from a very privileged class. They go to journalism schools. They used to, when Kathleen Graham was around, they used to go to the same cocktail parties as the people they were covering.
That's right.
And they get kind of embedded in this elite class. They're not the scrappy, non-college educator, cub reporters they used to be.
Or even scrappy and college educated.
Speaking truth to power. And he interrupted me and he said, you don't know anything about my background. I said, well, that's exactly why I prefaced my comments saying that. But I do know about Sydney Ember. She went to, her father's a Hollywood producer, her mother's a writer. She went to a private school. She went to Brown. She started out as a business analyst at Bloomberg. Then she was a media reporter.
And totally clueless.
BlackRock? Can I ask you?
Look at BlackRock?
Because we're not using the microphone, so other sound.
That's fresh information.
Yeah. She then covered politics for the New York Times. I doubt she even took a course in government, history, economics, international affairs. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit that she doesn't know. But here these people are, they're bringing up his socialism, and everything they're saying is true about his background, but they're obviously doing it to hurt him. And the people, when you see this on Twitter, the Bernie Twitter sphere is like, oh, this is great. Bernie was rad in the 80s. We want to get this Bernie back.
Exactly.
But that's not who they're trying to attract. They're trying to turn up because they think socialism is going to be the real, which is why he's speaking next week on what is democratic socialism. But do you think that we, the Bernie people, are freaking out about the influence of these mainstream media reporters or not?
Good question.
Well, you are freaking out, but
You think it's legitimate? Are we overreacting?
no, I think that, and this is fundamental to the entire left project that I write about here, is that a lot of the people who got into the Democratic insurgency with hope that they could reform and reshape the Democratic Party took the Tea Party as a model in some ways, that the way that the Tea Party was able to take a rump group with a lot of grassroots energy and change the nature of the Republican Party. The difference, there's two huge important
money?
differences.
A boatload of money?
Well, one of them is money, which is that the big moneyed interests on the Republican side absolutely prefer the Chamber of Commerce, Boehner style of Republican Party. But they can work with the Tea Party version. They prefer a liberal democracy, liberal in the old school sense of it, but they can work with fascism. As long as, they maintain their power. The other element is Fox News. That when the Tea Party, they took out Eric Cantor first, and then a couple more the next time. The Fox really got behind the Tea Party. And that was the megaphone that hit every single district. And on the left, corporate America is fine with the liberal democracy under rule by Democrats, but it's not fine with democratic socialism. It's not fine with, and so there's
even though what it really is FDR style Democrat. Because Bernie ought to be saying that, in my opinion, because he. Even Kyle Kalinske did a great video that he's not really a democratic socialist, he's a social democrat.
Right.
But think back to the Powell memo. That was entirely to defeat FDR.
Right. But then the other point is there's no Fox News.
Yeah.
There's no
megaphone.
Multi-billion-dollar, most watched news network that not necessarily, it's not that its ratings are a couple million a day. So it's not like it blows it out of the water in that sense. But every Republican congressman fears it, and there isn't quite a thing on the left that, the Huffington Post flirted with having that ability at a moment, but it doesn't. But right now, there's no.
Yeah, and Rachel Maddow has gone completely batshit crazy. She's Russiagate conspiracy theorist. Think about it.
Rachel's the only thing. If she decided that, because she probably has enough pull at MSNBC that she could do it. If she decided that she was going to rally to the AOC Bernie wing of the party, that would, it's not the equivalent of Fox, but it would have enough of an effect that your rank and file member of the House of Representatives, they make their calculations based on what's, you know, the least likely to get them unelected, not the most likely to get them elected. And so if they see that Rachel Maddow now wants everyone to be for $15 minimum wage, Green New Deal, Medicare for all, free college, etc., the whole caucus, like except for the Blue Dogs and like some of the like more ideological New Dems who are like in aggressive opposition to that, but the ones that are like just watching which way the party's going, then they're, you know what, I don't want to get on the wrong side of Maddow and her indivisible.
She has that much.
Well, you know, she already said, because I organized a protest at Kamala's fundraiser in Beverly Hills at Jeff Shell's house. 2 people in this room were at that protest. And what we did was we just made a list of all the things that she had done as far as criminal justice and foreclosures. So we were handing it out, and they were taking it until this one woman from Kamala's group got a hold of it, and then she started ushering people from their Teslas right into the house. I said at that protest that I had seen Rachel Maddow give her exclusive interview to Kamala Harris, at the end of which she said, I think you are likely to be the Democratic nominee.
No way.
And we know that Comcast owns Universal, and they wanted her. She was like the Jeff Shell's Comcast. So what do you think of that? I mean, she's kind of flaming out a little bit, but...
I think that you get to there are people who get to a point where they have an independent power center within a corporate structure. There's very few of them. Like I think that they would dispose of a Lawrence O'Donnell, and so he's much more constrained. You know what the marching orders might be from on high, but I think if you're pulling the ratings and star power, like I think she's the only one that could, if she decided to go on the air and say this is where I am now, that they would have to ride it.
Yeah.